Well, we heard it there. U.S. President Donald Trump had raised the prospect of regime change in Iran following a U.S. attack on Iranian nuclear sites. Questions remain about how serious Trump's statement was or how a ceasefire between Iran and Israel could now alter any effort to unseat the regime in Tehran that could have been matter of discussion between Israel and the U.S. And it's also not clear what regime change would look like.
Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, seen here in file footage, has been Iran's supreme leader since 1989. He's now in hiding, cut off from electronic communication for his own safety, and has suggested possible successors. While the economy strains under economic sanctions, and with the military unable to deter attacks from Israel and the U.S. If Khamenei were no longer in the picture, an internal coup by senior government and military figures could keep the structure of the Islamic Republic going and prevent a new revolution. There's no guarantee, however, that fresh faces would mean a change in policy. A military dictatorship is another possibility, but there are long-simmering tensions between the elite Revolutionary Guard and the regular army. They operate in parallel and each have their own forces. The Revolutionary Guard is tasked with defending the Islamic Revolution. Though its senior leadership has been decimated, it still has influence. A takeover by the political opposition could follow a military defeat and the collapse of the government. But the opposition is splintered, with many jailed or killed over years of repression. The son of the former Shah, who was deposed in 1979, lives in the United States and is seen as one potential leader. But it's unclear how much support he would be able to muster. Any outside attempt to force regime change could face massive unintended consequences. Precisely why, until recently, the U.S. announced that regime change was not its aim.
Let's keep talking about this with Sara Kermanian. She's a researcher in international relations from the University of Sussex. Welcome to DW. Now, during the latest conflict, the U.S. and Israeli leaders hinted at regime change in Iran. Do you think that was one of the goals?
Hi, thank you for having me. Well, I believe the U.S. prefers either to come into terms with the Islamic Republic, or even if it comes to transformation, they would probably prefer an elite shift within the Islamic government, I believe. Because the reason I'm saying it is that they need a quick outcome, and a regime change is unlikely to occur overnight because Iran, the Islamic Republic, will continue to resist and retaliate, and the diversity of Iranian demands and the diversity of Iranian societies itself only adds complications to any transformation. But a protracted war carries the risk of regional escalation, which would threaten U.S. interests and also endangers this peace-seeking and powerful image that Trump has been trying to represent of himself. So at this stage, I think that's what they prefer, but it seems that it all comes down to whether Iran would accept the red lines that the U.S. have been trying to impose of them now that they are weakened quite a lot and they don't have much left to bargain. And now that the U.S., I believe, has achieved its key goals. But I think so far they have been using the prospect of regime change to further put pressure on the Islamic Republic and to expose its vulnerability. And regarding these kind of statements they have been making, that the U.S. and Israel are creating this opportunity for Iranian people to step in and to claim power through a democratic transition. I think these statements are very misleading if it comes to a regime change. A top-down transformation is those scenarios are what we can expect realistically. Because if you pay attention to the details of U.S. officials' statements, it becomes clear that this is not what they actually seek. For instance, recently, the White House spokesperson implied that if the Islamic Republic refuses engaging in diplomacy, then the Iranian people might logically want regime change. But this kind of framings obscure reality that for years Iranian factions of Iranian society, they've been demanding democracy, human rights, women and minorities' rights, better economy, end of clientism, more egalitarian maybe system, etc. Not a U.S. broker diplomacy. So what they have been doing is mostly the US projecting its own interest onto the will of the Iranian people, while in reality having all these kind of scenarios for either coming into agreement with the Islamic Republic or potentially a top-down transformation. And they're only willing to pursue either of those scenarios to the extent that it satisfies their interests.
All right. Israel has been talking about regime change, but always framing it as an indirect consequence of its actions. Now, they claim to have killed many senior members of the regime. You say the regime is significantly weakened. So is there a scenario in which this does resonate with people who are against the regime, and we might see, you know, a more organized opposition now emerge to seize a moment of weakness?
Well, from where I'm standing, the way I see it, I think at the moment the Islamic Republic may have become too weak to pose any immediate substantial international threat to the US, Israel, the broader international community, but not yet too weak to endanger its own population. And a new wave of repression of political activists, particularly minorities, women rights activists, is what we can expect and what many people are scared of. And you know that there are some groups of some communities in Iran who have been, I mean, there are people who have put most of their hope in the war and the top-down regime change, particularly the royalists. But there are also some communities who have been hoping to achieve to kind of seize this opportunity maybe for self-organization. But something we need to pay attention to is that the Islamic Republic have systemically destroyed political organizations for over 4 decades. So basically the party system doesn't even exist in Iran. Organized resistance hasn't existed in most places in Iran, with the exception of some areas such as, for instance, the Kurdish region, some parts of the Kurdish region. So we can't really expect people to organize overnight in those kind of places. And given the current state of the regime, I think we need to be worried about a renewed wave of crackdown on political activists at the moment. At least that is what I'm most concerned about.
Yeah. You mentioned the royalists, and we saw in the report Reza Pahlavi, he called on the Iranian people to use this moment to rise up. He's the exiled son of the toppled Shah, and he says that regime change is the only solution in Iran. Just give our viewers a sense of how much support he has among Iranians.
He has some support, that is not deniable, but it is not the only support. One reason that he's being heard so much, and this alternative has been highlighted, is that this is what mostly mainstream media and mostly maybe Western media, they have been focusing on. This is, as I said, I believe that the US and Israel, if it comes to a regime change, they would prefer top-down transformation, and they would prefer someone who's aligned with their interests and who would satisfy their interests. And this has been like that. So there has been so much investment on maybe representing his support bigger than what it actually is in Iran. But if you look at the Iranian society, what they want and what they have made of, how have they interpreted the war, how they have understood the war, how they're reacting to the war very significantly. Of course, royalists are the faction who view the war as an opportunity for a top-down regime change, and they have been long actually advocated for that. But others exist too. There are others who have been, even among those who have been supporting a top-down scenario, there are some people who are more hopeful of a more maybe centralist democratic shift. And there's a large portion of the society who's equally opposing the Islamic Republic and US-Israel military campaign. They're deeply concerned about the war's humanitarian toll and the impact on civil society and social movements, who have been weakened, and they might be even further weakened due to the consequences of the war. For them, the conflict is undermining what little space remained for grassroots organizing, as I said, and democratic agency. But as I said, there are also communities who are kind of standing neither in this spectrum. They feel that they can kind of use this situation because of the existence of history of self-organization in those areas. That they are encouraging people to self-organize, and they are kind of seeing it as a possibility to assert their agency. But I think, the royalists definitely are not the only voice that exists in this space, and this is what I think been mostly represented in media.
That was Sara Kermanian of the University of Sussex. Thank you for sharing your view and for putting all of this into perspective for us.
For more on this, we can speak now with Siba Shakib. She's an Iranian-German filmmaker and political activist who was born and grew up in Tehran. She joins us from Vienna. Thanks for being with us. Siba, as this conflict unfolded last week, we heard the U.S. and Israel mention the possibility of regime change in Iran. We also heard Reza Pahlavi, the exiled son of the former Shah, saying that the Islamic Republic has come to its end and is collapsing. What's your take?
Since 46 years, Iranian people are thinking that this regime is not going to last long. This regime will be over soon. And now it's another time that one more time that we're thinking maybe this time.
Now, Reza Pahlavi, whom I already mentioned, also said that now is the time to stand up against the regime, seemed to be addressing the people in Iran. How likely is it, in your opinion, that people in Iran will stand up to the regime?
Well, again, people have stood up against the regime since day one. And we've done whatever we can. Millions of Iranians had to leave the country. Thousands and thousands have been imprisoned, have been tortured, have been raped and executed. And it's an ongoing process. It's not as if we were waiting for bombs to arrive in Tehran and in Iran, and then we rise. On the contrary, now it's even more difficult to rise against the regime, because a country that has been attacked has to gather not behind the regime, but behind the flag, behind the culture, the nation, the country. And also, people, you showed it in your news takes, people are leaving Tehran and other cities as long as they are able to. How can we topple the regime while being on the run?
How much support would you say that the regime still has among the population in Iran?
I think honest support, people who really, really believe in the regime, who really, really trust the regime. It's so marginal, it's so few people that it's totally unimportant. People who depend on the regime, who are being paid by the regime, who are being forced by the regime, maybe 1/3 of the population.
Now, you and millions of Iranians like you, people of Iranian descent living outside the country, people who were born there and moved abroad, what role can the Iranian diaspora play in shaping Iran's future?
Since 46 years, a lot of us have tried to do whatever is possible. And even before that, against the Shah, there was also a diaspora. And they did what they could against the injustice that the Shah was executing against the people. And we continued. I mean, I'm too young for that, but the people before me and then my generation and the generations after me, we all continued to struggle to fight against the injustice in our country and to fight for democracy.
Now, given the latest strikes on the country, on its nuclear facilities and elsewhere, the assassination of some of its top military leaders, the weakening of its proxies in other countries, how do you see the trajectory of Iran shaping up moving forward from this point?
I'm afraid that the government is too strong to be toppled with the so-called 12-day war that has been opposed on Iran and also the people of Iran, not just against the government. It has a great impact, negative impact on the people of Iran, of course. I'm afraid that the situation is not ready yet to topple the government, because, again, the government is stronger than before. They have shown that they are capable of reacting in a very dangerous way, in a way that the population, the Iranian population, does not agree with. And the power against the population, the influence against the population has grown one more time.
German-Iranian filmmaker and activist Siba Shakib, thank you very much for talking with us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.